Welcome to Passionate World Talk Radio Network, a wholly owned subsidiary of Global Media Network LLC. Our motto is educate, enlighten, and entertain. And today's episode 5 on Lest, L-E-S-T, we forget. We're starting the month on International Women's Month, and we're talking about human trafficking with women and girls all over. Lillian Cauldwell will start giving you an outline, followed by Betsy Wurzel, who will discuss a guest she had on last year, who wrote a book about human trafficking, since that's what he did for a living. And rounding up the discussion will be Lisa Skinner, who will be talking about homes that have been set up within the California area where she lives to help these ladies and girls get reacquainted with normalcy so that they can go back out into the work world. What did I learn when I looked up human trafficking? Well, if you go into Google, there are a lot of pages devoted to it. But I decided to go through the United Nations has a page on human trafficking. And the first thing they give you is the definition of what they consider human trafficking is all about. And according to them, it is the act of gathering, moving, receiving, or keeping human beings by threat, force, coercion, or deception for exploitative purposes, which for taking advantage of, since I'm having trouble with words today, purposes of sex, prostitution, other forms of sexual of taking advantage of, forced labor or service, slavery or forced labor as slaves, which is similar to slaves, servitude, or the removal of organs, which is quite prevalent now. It also includes if any person, whatever their gender, and that includes transgender as well, is brought against their will, without information, or coerced by someone who thinks they're superior or somebody who's in power over them, and they become a victim. And this also includes, ladies and gentlemen, illegal labor migration. It begins with the African slaves. When the white man decided to buy the slaves, tribes who have lost in war. So who's to blame? The Europeans, the Americans, and of course the tribes themselves in Africa who sold to the Far East, to the Arabs. So that's when it started. In 1807, the British passed a law against slavery. It was against the law to own a slave, buy a slave, sell slaves. In 1820, this perked me up, the U.S. banned slavery. 40 years before they got to it officially with Abraham Lincoln in the 1860s with the Civil War. Once they stopped importing black slaves, they started importing and exporting white slaves. And white slavery is the procurement of white people by use of deceit, force, or drugs, a white woman or girl that is taken against their will and sold into slavery. By 1899 through 1902, the International Conference Against White Slavery was brought about by the equivalent to the United Nations. In 1904, another agreement for the suppression of white slave traffic was signed. and it ensured that any of its victims could be helped so they could get back into society. In 1912, criminal charges were signed into law. So if you found trafficking, you could actually be brought to trial for it. By World War I, the League of Nations, of course, was formed by Wilson. And they, in 1921, they put another international convention for the suppression of trade for women and children. 33 countries signed it. In World War I, they still continued with human trafficking. They didn't do anything about it, even though it was against the law. But it's once you start something like that, it's difficult to break it up. In 1949, the UN had another convention on the suppression of human trafficking, and this time 66 nations signed it. And then during the next 51 years, organ harvesting and labor traffic was added to it. So think about that, ladies and gentlemen. Illegal labor immigration. Well, who else are we going to have to take care of our crops for us? Nobody in the United States. They all consider that beneath them. In the year 2000, it was criminalized yet again by the transnational organized crime. And they determined there was 150 trafficking flows all over the world with human trafficking. It's been increasing since the year 2000. And importantly enough, in 2007, 32% of people were forced into labor immigrants or labor migrants. 4 years later, 74% of females were being trafficked. In 2011, it dropped to 49%. But in 2011, 10 to 25% were girls who were being trafficked. Something to think about, since we get concerned about the labor problems in our country, but also about the immigrants who are coming up through South America and Mexico. And you wonder how many of them are getting involved with this through the cartels who use them to bring their drugs across the border. In my mind, that is human trafficking. Betsy?
Hi, everyone. I have an interesting story to tell. Bear with me, I got to take off my glasses to read. I did an interview back on April 14th, 2022, with a former sex trafficker, Derek Williams, and also with Dr. Deena Graves, who is a founder, president, and director of M3Transformations, which offers courses on how to protect children and adults from predators. Transformations provides help to victims heal from their experiences. I believe they're located in Texas, but I will have the information on how you could contact Dr. Deena Graves and the M3 Transformations in the blog. So make sure you read the blog. And Derek Williams and Dr. Deena Graves wrote a book called Mind Games, MINDGAMES, which is available on Amazon. And I have to tell you, folks, it was mind-blowing and scary to think about what is out there, what's behind that dark internet web. You think your child is playing with someone their own age? They may not be. Could be a predator on the other side. What do the human sex traffickers look for? Well, this guy, Derek, pimped out his girlfriend, was the first person. she was being sexually abused at home, and he said, well, you might as well get paid for it. What they do, their mindset is to look for women or girls, and probably boys, that are vulnerable, that are from abusive homes, that are looking to fit in, that are looking to be accepted. And they go lurking on Facebook, on Instagram, in malls. If they see a young girl or a boy showing that they're having a problem at home, they go look for them and they will start being friendly with them. And that's how they get their confidence. And then they use their weakness against them, which is partly narcissistic behavior when they do that. So I want to give some advice to parents or guardians. Please keep an eye on what your children are doing on the internet. I know it's hard with teenagers, and I'm glad I don't have a teenager now. Don't let them be posing, showing their, you know what, all over the internet. There are predators that are lurking. They are looking. Do you know that all they had to do is Google that name? How easy it is to get a person's address now? It's scary. They could just find them, and then they end up missing. So try to tell your girls not to be inappropriate. I know that's hard sometimes to do. And please, as parents and guardians, please do not abuse your children mentally, emotionally, sexually, because you know what, I'm going to tell you. When a woman, a young woman, a girl, a boy, when they're abused at home, they're going to look for acceptance outside their home. And they're going to go with people who accept them. You are setting your child up for abusive relationships. And so that's what I have to say. The interview, I will put the link to that in the blog for Jeannie. It's a great interview. It's a very interesting, informative, shocking interview. And this guy, he said there was women, he went all over the world with this human sex trafficking, from young girls to even older women. And it was really an incredible story. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, hi everybody. This is Lisa Skinner. I have to say that I also uncovered some unbelievably mind-blowing information on human trafficking that I want to share with everybody. And what I discovered, unbeknownst to me, because I have believed that human trafficking really was about exploiting young girls and boys for sex. And what I have discovered is the layers that are included in human trafficking all over the world just go very, very deep. So let me share a little bit of the information that I've uncovered for you. There actually right now are more human slaves in the world today than ever before in history. 80% of those sold into sexual slavery are under 24 years old, and some are as young as 6. A human trafficker can earn 20 times what he or she paid for a girl, provided the girl was not physically brutalized to the point of ruining her beauty. The pimp could sell her again for a greater price because he had trained her and broken her spirit, which saves future buyers from the hassle. A 2003 study in the Netherlands found that on average, A single sex slave earned her pimp at least $250,000 a year. Although human trafficking is often a hidden crime and accurate statistics are difficult to obtain, researchers estimate that more than 80% of trafficking victims are female, and over 50% of them are children. According to a 2009 Washington Times article, the Taliban buys children as young as 7 years old to act as suicide bombers. The price for a child suicide bomber is between $7,000 and $14,000. We've heard of those child suicide bombers, but for some reason I was under the impression that they were either volunteering or their parents were volunteering them. Well, they're very much a part of the human trafficking antics. UNICEF estimates that 300,000 children younger than 18 are currently trafficked to serve in armed conflicts worldwide. So they're using them for military purposes. Most human trafficking in the United States occurs in New York, California, and Florida. I live in California. I've been here most of my life. I grew up here, and I have been very aware of the human trafficking severity that goes on in this state. According to the United Nations Children Fund, which is UNICEF, over the past 30 years, over 30 million children have been sexually exploited through human trafficking. Belgium, Germany, Greece, Israel, Italy, Japan, the Netherlands, Thailand, Turkey, and the US are ranked very high as destination countries of trafficked victims. Family members will often sell children and other family members into slavery. The younger the victim, the more money the trafficker receives. For example, a 10-year-old named Geeta was sold into a brothel by her aunt. The now 22-year-old recalls that when she refused to work, the older girls held her down and stuck a piece of cloth in her mouth so no one would hear her scream as she was raped by a customer. She later contracted HIV. Human trafficking is one of the fastest growing criminal enterprises because it holds relatively low risk but has very high profit potential. Criminal organizations are increasingly attracted to human trafficking because, unlike drugs, humans can be sold repeatedly. Human trafficking is estimated to surpass the drug trade in less than 5 years. It is primarily men who are driving human trafficking, specifically trafficking for sex. I have a lot more information and facts to share with you that I can pick up on perhaps our next episode. But I also want to share with you that there are federal services available for individuals who have experienced human trafficking. I used to belong to an international organization called Seroptimist. And it's a women's organization that their sole purpose is to better the life of women and girls in many, many aspects. We did a lot of different fundraisers and projects for the betterment of women and girls' life. And again, I'm here in California, and I was aware of a rehabilitative home, a rehabilitation home that was set up actually right here in my county for the surviving sex trafficked girls who were rescued from their plight. And we were asked to help mentor these girls. So there is an organization that has the National Human Trafficking Hotline. I unfortunately don't have the number, but their organization is based on the trafficking of human beings for sex, and really to increase the awareness that it's happening right here in our communities all around us every day. It's an industry that generates billions of dollars annually, and it exploits some of the most vulnerable people in our society. It's called Refuge for Women, and they provide a safe place for women and girls who are victims of sex trafficking. And while this problem feels international in its scope, it's very much a local issue. In fact, it is happening in your community right now. Have no doubt about that. This is a major crisis that's going on. And their motto is to end human trafficking one woman at a time. They are the nation's largest housing program for victims of human trafficking and sexual exploitation. They say that sex trafficking is a $10 billion a year industry in the United States alone. And this is really a sad statistic. 80% of its victims end up back on the street without a safe recovery home. Only 12 states have only one house offering safety and recovery. 16 states have no recovery housing at all. They help women find hope and healing so they can lead fulfilling lives. They provide education. When a woman understands what she is worth more than what she has been told, she can start to see a future worth fighting for. They stand with the women they serve for as long as it takes. This combats feelings of abandonment and hopelessness by providing stability and care during a time of great need. Their social enterprise, called Survival Made, is helping women learn valuable skills and discover their unique gifts so they can provide for themselves and their families, break the cycle of poverty, and live fulfilling lives. These are some of the things that they teach and work with these survivors in these recovery homes and prepare them with life skills so they can eventually move on and start a life of their own. They create jobs and build the confidence of their survivors. So I think my personal experience with one of these recovery homes was unbelievably impressed with their commitment and what they are doing for the girls who have survived being sexually trafficked. I mean, I can't even imagine the repercussions that would have on somebody physically and socially and psychologically. And there are many of these homes, but obviously not enough. So we really need to, pray that they will continue to grow these recovery homes for people in this situation. But they do exist out there. I've got one right here in my backyard, and they are just a wonderful organization. There's several organizations. I just told you about the biggest one that will help the survivors of human trafficking. So I'm not sure if y'all were aware that it is as big of a problem as it really has turned out to be, but don't kid yourself, because it is. And it, according to what I've read, it's getting worse and worse and worse. So we all need to keep our eyes and ears open and pay attention out there. There are a lot of girls teenage girls, younger girls that are victims of sexual trafficking right now, that are so afraid to come forward or to try to escape or to get somebody's attention for help because they're afraid of the consequences they will suffer if they're caught trying to alert somebody for help. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next week.
Thank you all very much for listening to today's episode 5 of Human Trafficking with Women and Girls, and indirectly celebrating International Women's Month. Next week, we'll be talking about, Betsy?
Women in the workplace.
Well, women in the workplace and why women are more severely treated by their women bosses than by men. If you have any questions or you have some stories or something to share about what we discussed today about human trafficking, you can reach Lillian Cauldwell at pwrnetworkllc@gmail.com. And the article she took this from was The Hankering for history.com/history-of-human-trafficking. But you can also just look up human trafficking and be overwhelmed by the plethora of information that's out there, because this is nothing new. And man, it's always man, isn't it? Men seem to take advantage of a woman's weakness and then use it to sell it on the open market. So the next time you see a girl or a woman running down the street, maybe partially clothed or without shoes, or they're shrieking or pounding on the window, go and find out. I know that a lot of this human trafficking has happened under people's noses because it's so ordinary to see a teen girl come out looking unkempt, dirty hair, schlocky clothes. But ask yourself, is this an ordinary teen or somebody's being held against their will? Betsy, where can people reach you?
My email address is Sloan, SLOAN, Betsy, BETSY 31 @gmail.com. And I forgot to mention when I was speaking, I get on my email disgusting porn. And these are women supposedly in the neighborhood, young women. I even think young girls. And I'm thinking, like with the show today, where are they getting these girls from, these women? They are being sex trafficked. It is in my neighborhood. It is in my area. And I'm in New Jersey, so New York isn't that far away. But it is a huge problem. So I want to remind everyone, please treat your children kindly. Thank you.
Lisa?
I just want to add one more comment. Pay attention. Pay close attention to what your children are doing, who they're talking to on the internet. Our lives are so busy these days, and it's easy not to pay attention to who our kids are talking to, but they can be easy victims out there with all the modern technology that's available to everybody. And this is all over the world. It's not just in local communities. If you'd like to comment on anything that I shared with you today, you can reach me at my email address. It's dementiawhisperer1@gmail.com. Thanks again for being here, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Absolutely. You all have a good weekend.